There is a record in the archive, third vault, seventh shelf, beneath the dust of what scholars call the eighth cycle, the civilization of Auren-Tesh. They were, by every measure that mattered to them, reasonable people. Their streets were clean. Their governance was careful. Their dead were buried with ceremony, and their children were fed. They had one belief above all others, that most of the suffering in the world was caused by misunderstanding. They were not entirely wrong. In year 104, the Institute for Linguistic Clarity published what it called the first rationalization, a list, modest at first, of words that carried more confusion than meaning, words so layered in metaphor that no two speakers could agree on what they meant. The Institute called this linguistic waste. The people of Auren-Tesh called it progress. The simplifications came slowly. A word for a particular kind of grief, the grief of something you never had, was reclassified as redundant. Ordinary grief covered it. The word for the feeling of standing in a place where something important once happened, and knowing it, was determined to have no practical application. It was removed. The words for the 17 subtle variations of longing were reduced to one. Auren-Tesh became more efficient. Two speakers could exchange information quickly, without ambiguity, without misunderstanding. What they could not do, what no one fully noticed until much later, was think what they could not say. By the third generation, children grew up with a language of precise edges, clean, minimal, efficient. The archive contains school records from this period. By every metric available to Auren-Tesh, their children were performing well. But a scholar from the archive noticed something else in those records. The children could no longer answer the question, "What do you want?" Not because they were unwilling, not because they were afraid, because the words for wanting, for the specific ache of a future you could not yet name, had been removed 40 years prior. The artists of Auren-Tesh did not rebel. They simply fell silent. There was no censorship, no prohibition, only the quiet impossibility of reaching for a word that was no longer there. A blank page is not resistance. It is the honest record of an absence. Relationships continued. People coupled and uncoupled, shared homes, raised children. But the archive contains testimony from this period. A man, in his 40s, speaks of his partner of 20 years. He uses every word available to him. She is good, he says. She is correct. We are stable. He pauses a long time. Then he says, I know there is more. I can feel it. I do not have the word for it. There is a journal preserved in the archive from a woman who had lived through the early rationalizations. She writes, I tried to tell my granddaughter something about how I felt when I was young, standing at the edge of the sea, and the feeling that the world was enormous, and I was enormous in it. She paused here, several lines left blank. Then she wrote. She looked at me very patiently, and she said, I understand. The sea is large. The music institutions closed. Not because music was forbidden, because no one could articulate what it was for. The argument had no language in which to be made. The concert halls emptied. The instruments were sealed. The scores remained, but there were no longer words for why a person would want to play them. The people of Auren-Tesh continued. They worked. They ate. They were, by every measure available to them, fine. But the archive's observers noted something in the final generations. No one was surprised by anything. No one was delighted. No one was devastated. These were not emotions that Auren-Tesh had prohibited. They were emotions for which Auren-Tesh no longer had room. The last document in the Auren-Tesh record is a government communiqué. It is 3 sentences. The population is stable. Infrastructure is maintained. We recommend continuation. There is no signature. Not because it was removed, because by then, no word existed for the idea that the person who writes a thing should be known. Auren-Tesh did not end in a day. It ended in all the days that followed each other without anyone being able to say what they were for. The archive preserves what they could not. This has been the 8th cycle. There will be more. The archive continues.